So our next office hours is going to be April 30th at 10 o'clock. It will be mostly focused on the annual report, which was updated recently. It's still not available for you to complete. So even if you finished your project and want to get a head start on that, it's not quite ready for you to completely fill out at this point. If you filled it out last year, you will see some differences in this year's annual report. But we really do our best to try to keep the information as minimal as possible to help you get through it quickly. We really direct you basically to your contract as the basis for filling out the annual report. So we're going to go over all the ins and outs and details of the annual report at our next office hours, which again, April 30th at 10 a.m. And an invitation will be sent by email, and our whole team will also get that invitation and make sure that we're in the same meeting as you guys next time around. Just a quick reminder as well, the VCIF new project orientation meeting is a requirement for all project directors and financial directors. We still have some project directors and financial directors who have not viewed the orientation meeting. It is available on our FundSource chapter at this link right here. So if you go to the OCJP website and you go to the grants manual, there's a chapter of the manual for the VCIF grant, and that has all the resources you will need for this project, including past office hours recordings and PowerPoint slides, as well as this orientation meeting recording. It's an hour long. It is required for everybody. So if you don't remember watching this, please make sure you go ahead and watch it. If you're a new project director or a new financial director, you do have 30 days or about a month to watch this video once you become oriented with the VCIF grant. So there's a lot of really good information in this orientation meeting. If you have watched this, you're probably doing great implementing your project. If you haven't seen it yet and you have questions, a lot of them can be answered by watching this video. Once you watch it, please email your PM specialist to let us know, because we are tracking attendance. Another good place to start if you have questions about your project or about OCJP grants in general is our grants manual. This is right on our website. There are two ways to navigate it. One way is by using this kind of menu here on the left-hand side, and that will take you through each chapter. If you're going to navigate it that way, you kind of have to know what you're looking for. And so we also recommend that if you are interested in a very specific piece of information, go ahead and click the download button here. It says click here. It's right on the front page of the grants manual. Every time you go to the grants manual, we recommend that you download a new copy of the manual, because we do update it regularly, and those updates would be found in the new PDF once you download it. And once you do that, you can then search in the PDF. You can type, Control F or Apple F, and search by word or keyword. And so this is a great way also to kind of find very specific pieces of information. We, as project management specialists, use the grants manual all the time to find information when we're asked questions from agencies. So this is definitely a good resource for you. Just a reminder to everybody, if you have any change in any project personnel, we do need to be notified within 10 days of that change. So that's if your email address changes, if you take a different position and someone else takes over, we need to be notified of that so that we can be communicating with the right person. We send out communications all the time. Other state offices send out communications using the information that we have on file for these three positions. So if the mayor steps down or there's an election, right, we need to be notified who this new person is so we can update our information. If you follow this QR code here, it will take you to the page of our grants manual that specifies what the roles of these three positions are. So if you're not sure who should be in this position, it should definitely, you should be able to find that information on our grants manual. And in particular, the project manager project director should be someone who is very, very accessible by email or phone, so that we can get in touch with them and ask questions and check in on the status of your project as you're implementing it. And then the last reminder we have for grants management is related to civil rights compliance. The civil rights training that is on the OCJP grants manual website must be completed every fiscal year that you have a grant with OCJP. So likely you already completed it. once you got your contract, this guidance is all over the grants manual, the contract, everything that we share with you. So it is a quick training. There's a quiz afterwards that will then let you know once you've completed it, you'll be able to save that, that confirmation and keep that in your grant file. You do not need to send it to us, but please keep it for your records. And we will be at some point doing a status check to make sure that this was completed by the project director and or the civil rights compliance officer. If you've already completed this for a different OCJP grant, you do not need to complete it again for VCIF. We've gotten that question a couple of times. So just once a fiscal year for any OCJP grants that you have. I'm going to pause here for a second because I've been talking a lot. Do we have any questions for this first little foray into grants management? It looks like in the chat, Kate has been posting some links to some of the things that have been on the slides as well. So you're welcome to click there and explore while we're in this office hours. Okay, let's keep it moving. I'm going to toss this over to, oh, I'm sorry, this is still me. I have a couple more slides. So the next thing we want to talk about is the monitoring process for your contracts. This is going to be brand new information. So if you have been kind of tuning out because a lot of the stuff I've been saying is old hat, this is the time to tune back in. Over the next several months, all the contracts, all the VCIF contracts that end in fiscal year 24 have to be monitored for implementation to make sure that things are going according to how you said they would go in your contract. This is a new process that we're implementing for OCJP. This is unique at this point to the VCIF grant, as a lot of things have been, because this project has been so massive and very time focused. So we ask you, to bear with us a little bit. There might be some kinks as we go through this. We've tried to work out a bunch of them as we've been going along. We have tested this process out. Doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect, but the first thing that you will see when it comes time to monitor is you're going to see an email from me, from your project management specialist. It might be from someone else with the state who is in our, the Office of Criminal Justice Programs. We are trying to cover as many of these as quickly as possible. So there's only, as you saw, 6 of us working on this grant. So we might need to, you might be interacting with folks that you haven't interacted with before. So just a heads up. But you're going to get an email. That's always going to be the first action that occurs, and it's going to look like this. It's going to be to the authorized official. So most times it's going to be to the mayor, and it's going to copy the project director and fiscal director. And it's going to say, basically, you have contract with OCJP. We have to monitor it. We're going to monitor it using what's called point in time monitoring, or PIT. And it's going to tell you which contract is being monitored. So some of you have multiple contracts. And it's going to give you this instructions that you need to follow in order to complete the monitoring. The instruction is basically going to be a link to an online form that you will fill out. And we're going to attach an invoice to this contract. And the invoice is going to be something that you submitted to us, right? One of your invoices that you sent saying, hey, we spent this much money on this contract. And what that tells us is it tells us you're ready for your contract to be monitored. The threshold that we are starting this process at is 10%. So once you have invoiced for 10% of your fiscal year 24 budget in your contract, that tells us, oh, this agency has started implementing their project. They're ready to be monitored. And that will trigger you to be eligible to receive this email. So what you'll do is you'll open up this invoice, you'll click on this link, and you'll fill out the form that is on this web page. There's also going to be a deadline that you will need to fill out this form by. It is also helpful for if you email us once you've completed your monitoring form. Lastly, and it's not on this email, but there will also be videos, like walkthrough step-by-step videos that will be available to you, so you can kind of go through the process and see someone from our office go through it and take you through each step that you'll need to complete. So again, key points. You have to fill out the form. It's going to be due 15 calendar days after you receive the email. So it's a pretty tight turnaround, but there's not a ton that goes into this. So if you've been keeping track of your expenses, you've been keeping track of the items that you've purchased and received, this should go really, really easy for you. If you have only equipment expenses, this is going to be a breeze. Some of you also have travel and training expenses, and then there will be also some processes for you to fill out to let us know kind of what travel, what training expenses those were. When you fill out the form, you're only going to be filling out the form based on the expenses that are in the invoice. So if you have a $100,000 grant and you invoice for $20,000 worth of expenses, we're going to attach that invoice for $20,000. And all you have to do is fill out the form for those expenses, not for your whole budget. And not even for expenses that have happened since then, right? We're only looking at what is in that invoice. The attachments that will be included that you'll need to gather are the invoice, of course, that you submitted to us. And then any invoices, your purchasing policy, evidence of the bids or quotes if you had to go through that process to purchase any of the equipment that's part of this of that invoice. Receipts or proofs of purchase. So sometimes folks got the receipt for what they received, or maybe they got a printout that came with the shipment, something like that, like a shipping label. What am I saying? Shipping package slip. It does need to include the items that you received and the cost of those items. So you might have to kind of assemble multiple items together to be able to prove, hey, this is what we spent and this is what we received. And then lastly, if the items were $500 or over, you'll have to take pictures of those items. So pause here again, because that was a lot of information. I see we do have a question in the chat, which I'll get to. But just know that this doesn't have to be like fully understood at this point in time. We will continue to provide you with resources to be able to fill this out. So don't feel like you need to 100% be an expert in this right away. The question that we have in the chat is from Carl. Do we need serial numbers on each purchase or just photos? So if there are serial numbers that were assigned to the equipment that you received, there's going to be a place for you to fill out those serial numbers. Yes. I know that feels like it might be burdensome. So we're willing to work with you to make sure that you're able to complete this in 15 days and that we get the information that we need. So just, I would say if you're worried about the volume here of what you all have to report on, don't panic yet. We understand that there are some really large purchases, right? Like 100 radios or something, and each maybe has a serial number. We don't need you to write out each individual serial number. We have a process for you to do this in a streamlined way. So just wait until you receive the guidance via email, and that will kind of help you figure out how to proceed with this. And Michelle asked if the meeting's being recorded. Yes, it is being recorded. Do we have any more questions about the PIT or point in time monitoring process? Okay, if things occur to you as we're moving through the PowerPoint, you can always put them in the chat, or we can pause and go back to any of the slides if you need to look at them again. So now I'm going to pass it to Jackie, who's going to take us through some grant implementation reminders, things that we've gone over in the past. Take it away, Jackie.
All right, so right now we're going to talk about purchasing your equipment. First and foremost, you are going to follow your agency's procurement policies. So if you have sole source, policies in place or a bid process, you will need to go off of that. You will also need to follow Tennessee and federal law, and that is especially concerning the drones. So if you have drones, I think most of our drone people have gotten through that and bought those, but you will need to follow those regulations. You will also need to follow the VCIF requirements, and that is concerning the LPRs. You've got for that, the TDOT application, which if you have LPRs, you should have already started. And if you do have LPRs, you will have gotten a memo on January 26th that you should look over and make sure there's step-by-step ways of purchasing those LPRs. So you will need to look back at that memo. And hopefully you got it. If not, feel free to reach out to your project management specialist and they can get that for you. With the LPRs, you also need to be purchasing those off the statewide contract. That's statewide contract 450. And because they will be installed on state right-of-ways, that's why it's important that you do that TDOT application. Another VCIF requirement is concerning the P25 compliant radios. So please make sure that you are following all the regulations on those. Another thing you need to be checking on is the contract terms. This is especially salient if you're looking at like subscriptions in those professional fees line items. So you cannot use the VCIF funds for agreements or contracts with a vendor that will go past the grant cycle, which is going past the end of 2020 fiscal year 2025. So if you have something that's like a 10-year agreement with some vendor, you cannot do that. It can only be until the end of the grant. And so you may need to ask them to prorate it and just give them tell them that you can only do it through 25 if it's in your 25 budget. You will also, for those requirements like the P25 radios, at the very beginning of this, when you signed your original contract, your authorizing official will have signed some VCIF equipment certifications, and those are available online. I don't know if we have a link to that, but I'm sure we can get one up here, or if you need a link to that, just let me know and in the chat, and we'll get that. But that was just laying out all the different requirements for the equipment. Okay, and next slide. If you are purchasing a vehicle or something such as a car, armored rescue vehicles, boats, UTVs, ATVs, trucks, vans, anything that goes. I don't know if anyone has any golf carts or anything like that, but it needs to be marked with branding that is consistent with your agency's other fleet vehicles. And unless when you were doing your original scope, it was described as covert or undercover, it does need to be marked with that branding. And vehicles that are issued to your unit in the scope, they're only used for the purpose that you let us know about in the contract scope. Let's see, and I see we have some questions. We'll keep an eye on those and we'll answer those when we're done. But if you have any other things that you need to purchase for this fiscal year, you definitely need to place that order and make those purchases as soon as possible, because we only have, let's see, we've got April, May, and June. So we've got 3 months left until the end of the fiscal year. If you do anticipate any delays with your vendor or with ordering, or something is going on, please be sure you are touching base with your project management specialist as soon as you know about those delays, so that you can make some arrangements and figure out what you need to do. And just again, be sure you're following those agency procurement policies from your individual agencies. Okay, and if you are hiring staff, you must use the personnel spreadsheet to notify us, OCJP, of your grant-funded staff. And any of those staffing changes that are made throughout the life of your project, you need to let us know. So if you let someone go and you hire someone new with the grant funds, you do need to let us know. And you need to give that notification within 10 days of that that staff changing over. You have to fill your vacancy within 45 days, but if for some reason it does stay empty, you need to provide us with a status update every 30 days. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, you don't need to submit that form again every 30 days, and you can just send an email. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, the
Okay.
form is only to be used if there are changes that need to be communicated to us, not for
Yeah.
the status updates. And again, and this is also, I mean, the language in the slide is a little bit unclear, but this is just for grant funded staff. So vacancies
Yes.
in the rest, other parts of your department, you don't need to let us know, obviously. Just wanted to make sure that everyone was clear on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. And I think that is it about the purchasing. Uh, Before we get to those questions that are on in the chat, does anyone have any questions they want to ask out loud, or if you want to come off your microphone and ask, now is a great time. We're all kind of in the same boat here, so I know people are having a lot of the same issues, so please don't be shy about asking. We're here to help. Um, let's see.
So the question from Holly about the information for audit purposes requirement, I'm going to read it out loud just to see maybe folks are kind of listening to this more than watching it or looking at the chat. I'm confused about the information for audit purposes requirement. Our grant amendment letter stated at least 90 days before the end of its fiscal year, the grantee shall complete the information for audit purposes, or IAP, form online, accessible through the Edison supplier portal, to notify the state whether or not grantee is subject to an audit. The grantee should submit only one completed form online during the grantee's fiscal year. End quote. The question then says, however, the OCJP website indicates that the IAP form needs to be completed by non-governmental agencies only, which is correct. To be honest, Holly, that's the first time I saw that it needed to be completed by non-governmental agencies only. So that's new information for me. I don't want to give you the wrong information. If you don't mind sending, well, you don't have to send it because you've already sent it to us. Why don't we get back to you on this? I don't think we're going to get back to you during this meeting, but we'll follow up with you. And we will try to issue that guidance in a way that kind of is accessible to everybody. So maybe we'll put something on our fund source chapter, because we've gotten a lot of questions about the IAP form. You're not the first person to ask about it. It does seem like it's a confusing process. And we are not the ones who, on our team, really oversee that. So a lot of times we forward these questions on. I'm going to do the same with this question. So that said, does anybody else on our team feel like they know the answer to this? Because this threw me for a little bit.
No, Ben, but I do want to let you know that I forwarded that team, the chat message that Holly put in there to your email, so that you have that, so you don't lose that.
Thanks, Jackie.
Mm-hmm.
Good question, Holly.
Again, I don't know if this is the correct answer, but I do recall a team meeting in which we discussed this, where I don't believe the language was updated, but the reason why it may still be in there is because it replaced a previous method that a bunch of different agencies used. So just know that that may be the result of old language, but yeah, I think it would be helpful to get concrete guidance and in writing and then send it back.
Yeah, the nonprofit only, or not nonprofit, the non-governmental language may have been old language. So we'll see. We'll see what we learn on that. Thank you for asking that question, Holly. Alonza says, I don't recall receiving a PIT monitoring notification email. Have I missed something? No. Great question. These have not gone out. How I muted myself. We are still working on finalizing the list of who's going to be receiving these emails. If your contract ends this fiscal year, you will be getting an email. But no one has missed them yet. You should be getting them in the next coming weeks. Arpy says, to piggyback off the question re IAPs, if I have filled it out and sent it to the state where we were recently asked to provide, does that fill the requirement for the grant? Yes, that's my understanding, is that once you complete this and send it, complete it in Edison, you're good. That's not, we're not, the VCIF grant is not the only grant that this concerns. So this is a requirement for all state grantees, as far as I'm aware, not even just OCJP. So yes, once you do it once, you should be good. I don't know if that answered your question, RB. Okay, good. And then Holly's just, I think, followed up. We are a municipality, and all municipalities are required by the comptroller's office to be audited annually. Anyway, yeah, no, it's a good point. And I think again, this process was developed like, if we're here, way up here. And so I don't know. A lot of times we're communicating, guidance that we receive through many layers. And so I just don't want to say, even though it may not make sense for you to fill out this form based on the information you're sharing, I can't say at this point whether or not it's required or not. Obviously, we want to support you to only do the work that needs to be done and not do extra stuff. So I understand where you're coming from. We'll try to get that information and share it back out.
Do we have any other questions about purchasing? If not, I think we can move on to Kate, and she is going to talk about those amendment requests. Ooh, so fun.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, so this is just a reminder about the amendment request. The deadline to submit has passed. So if you are needing to submit a request now, you kind of need to explain in your email like why you're submitting a late request. And I do want to note that any requests are not guaranteed and are subject to approval. So just keep that in mind when you're submitting a request to your assigned PM. And also, please remember funds do not roll over, and that any funds not spent by June 30th, 2024, those funds will be lost. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then if you are currently receiving an amendment, you should continue with your project during that process, the amendment process, using your current invoice workbook. Of course, if you have an item in your fiscal year 24 contract that's being amended, just keep in mind that if that item is being amended or if it's like being moved to fiscal year 25, you cannot purchase that item until the amendment effective date or until fiscal year 25 starts. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're continuing with your project. And then for more info on amendments, if you happen to miss the last office hours, there is a link in the chat and you can kind of go back and like review that. And then of course, if you have any questions, you can just reach out to your assigned PM and they should be able to help you with those questions. Moving on, another reminder for invoicing, VCIF is a reimbursement grant and your agency needs to spend that money on the budgeted items. And then once you do that, you can invoice us for reimbursement for those funds. And of course, monthly invoicing is strongly recommended. You can submit quarterly if you want. We just recommend like monthly because it's just easier to follow that way. But of course, you don't have to. Quarterly is fine. And of course, as mentioned, you must use the invoice workbook that was sent to you by OBF. And always double check your address, make sure it's correct, and also like where the checks will be mailed. And if you don't somehow have that information, again, just reach out to your assigned PM and they should be able to get that invoice workbook to you. If not, you can always reach out to OBF as well. Again, obviously use the current invoice workbook until any amendments that you're receiving are effective. And then once your amendment is effective, you will receive a new workbook from OBF and you'll just use that one moving forward. Let's see. And then also, at a minimum, agencies must request reimbursement no later than 30 days after the end of each quarter for all the expenses incurred during that quarter in its entirety. And of course, the next one is due April 30th. And that's if you don't submit monthly, you can just do quarterly. And lastly, always reach out to your OCJP PM specialist to discuss any barriers your agency is experiencing in expending funds, hiring grant-funded staff, or like any issues with executing some contracts, etc. And like once you reach out to them, we should be able to like help you figure out ways to get around those barriers.
I want to just add to the invoicing bit before we move on, that we've seen a couple of instances in the past couple of weeks of agencies invoicing in the wrong category. So they spent funds on maybe some capital item that cost $5,000 or more, and then invoiced for that amount in the supplies item. Or maybe they issued a purchase order and didn't actually receive the equipment yet, but went ahead and invoiced the state, right? These are some of the examples that we're seeing. Please be very careful when you're submitting an invoice. Please, if you're the project director or the financial director, maybe touch base before that's submitted with each other. Look at the contract a second time just to make sure that things that you bought and that you're invoicing for, that you're putting that money in the correct category in the invoice workbook. The workbook mirrors your contract budget, but the workbook doesn't have those details, right? It doesn't have every single item that you painstakingly spelled out in your contract budget. It just has the overall category. So it's understandable that, you know, if you're a fiscal person and you're processing hundreds of payments and then invoicing on various grants, right? We understand that there's a lot that's on your plates, and so this is just one of many grants that you probably are looking at. But just be careful. It does take a lot more time on the back end to try to figure out how to deal with that than it does on the front end to make sure that what you're submitting aligns with your budget. So just a request of caution as you're submitting invoices.
All right, so if there are any questions on any of the reminders that we just discussed, this is like the perfect time to ask those questions. And of course, you can put them in the chat or you can come off mute. All right. Again, if you have questions, we can always address those at the end of this presentation as well. Just moving on, there are a couple of resources that we do have. The first one is like hiring. If you're hiring for VCI funded positions, we have a link that will be put in the chat, and this is on our fund source chapter, and you can always go there. It has a list of a bunch of like areas like where you can post jobs and things like that, and that should be very helpful if you need that resource. And then the next one is a toolkit, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but this is offered by the federal government, and this is something that we kind of keep an eye on, and if we find anything that's very useful, we'll kind of like notify our grantees and things like that.
Yeah, that's right, Kate. We obviously do a lot of grant work with the Department of Justice, and so there are always resources, toolkits that are being released on various topics. And so as we become aware of those, we try our best to share them with grantees. And so this is one example of a toolkit for mitigating agency-specific stress. So that's just one option, and then hopefully we'll be posting more of these, as we become aware of them.
All right, moving on. There's another great resource, the Technical Assistance via UT LEIC. I know a lot of you people, a lot of you are very familiar with it. They offer a lot of great technical assistance for your contract. They also have a ton of training ideas and or needs. They have model policies and procedures for new equipment, training, etc. They provide template resolutions for city and county commission meetings. So this is a very good resource to have in your back pocket. They also have a training calendar, which you can either use the link or scan the QR code with your phone. And they always have tons of events going on that could be very useful. And the contact information for Rhiannon, she is very responsive and very helpful. So you can always reach out to her if you have any questions, or if you have training that's listed in your contract, you can always, look to her for guidance to try and figure out what trainings that you could utilize during whichever fiscal year you have training in. And again, these are just a couple of the trainings that are for free for VCIF grantees. They do also offer other trainings that are not free, so just kind of keep that in mind when you're looking around. There's a couple coming up in May, in June, some every month until August, and of course there's some in July. So if you're interested in any of those, you can reach out to Rhiannon, but you can also reach out to Ashley Ferris. Her email is at the bottom of the slide, and she's also a very good contact if you have any questions about trainings. And again, here's just another new free training for VCIF grantees. So if you're interested in this one's on May 1st. And again, you can always reach out to Ashley and Rhiannon to go about how getting signed up for, that training.
And it looks like Rhiannon is actually here. So hi, Rhiannon. I don't know if she wants to say anything or.
Guys, no, I'm just quietly listening.
Great.
Hey, Rhiannon. This is actually a point that I've been meaning to fix on this slide and just keep forgetting. But the LEIC trainings that are offered here that are on these slides are not just free for VCIF grantees, they are free for Tennessee law enforcement agencies. So if you have contacts in other agencies who are bummed that they missed out on the VCIF grant, these trainings are still available for them. That's right, Rhiannon. Am I correct on that?
Yep, that's right. We'll take anybody in the classes. We're happy to have them. And if anybody wants to host a class, we're happy to come to you guys also.
Yes, so Rhiannon is your point person, and or Ashley, if you are looking for things that you need training on, please do reach out to them. And please reach out to them as soon as the thought occurs to you, because it feels like there's a lot of time left with the VCIF grant, but that time is ticking. So the sooner that they can understand what your needs are as an agency and kind of understand the needs across the state for law enforcement agencies, the better they will be able to address those needs. And as we're near the end here, I just want to give another plug for our next office hours meeting. Again, that will be April 30th at 10 o'clock. It might end up going a little bit later than 11. We'll see, just depending on kind of how many people come and how many questions we have. But the topic is going to be the new annual report that is going to be due at the end of this fiscal year. It'll most likely be due a month after the end of the fiscal year, so end of July. And the next office hours will be going through exactly how to complete that report. So it's more of a training even than an office hours. If you would be so kind, we would really appreciate your feedback on this presentation. We apologize again for the late start that we unfortunately subjected you all to, but we hope this was informative. We hope you got your questions answered. The link to the training is in the chat. It is also available by going, just hold up your phone to this QR code. And when you are in the survey, just select VCIF office hours from the drop-down menu. It takes like 2 minutes to complete. So we love having feedback to make sure that we're on the right track. And with that, we are done with the presentation. I'm just going to pause again to see if anyone has any additional questions, and then I'll end the recording and subsequently end the meeting. So again, thank you all for your time today. We really appreciate it. We know it's a busy time for law enforcement, and that this isn't the only thing that y'all are working on. So we really appreciate your guys giving us your time and attention. And on behalf of the team, we're grateful for you. Good luck on the rest of your projects. Reach out if you have any questions. You're free to leave, and I'm going to end the recording